Yo, what's going on? Welcome back to the show. It's your boy JG, and if you are here, it means that my plot to hack all of your devices to autocorrect Joe Rogan to Jason Goldberg actually worked. Sorry. Now, before we dive into ruin today's topic, I just wanted to take a quick second to say thank you so much to everybody who's been giving me feedback on the show, the private messages, the emails, leaving comments, rating, reviewing, subscribing, sharing it on your social media. It means so freaking much to me. You have no idea. And I particularly love it when people are taking screenshots of them listening to the podcast. I mean, not pictures of themselves, but like on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or YouTube, whatever it is. And they share it on their IG stories and they tag me. I love that. I love hearing your takeaways. I love hearing what you're getting from these episodes. And I just want you to know I truly, truly appreciate it. And it allows me to know that my shop teacher in high school was wrong when he said these smooth little hands would never do anything useful because well, the notes for the show don't type themselves. So I'm really, really happy. Thank you guys so much for that. And enough about my high school trauma. Let's move on to the show. So once upon a time, a guy goes to see a fortune teller to have his palms read. And she's looking at his palms and she's reading them very carefully. And she turns to him and says, "You take life very seriously and your suffering is going to last until you reach age 40. Now the guy gets really excited. He's like, well, yeah, I have been serious. I've been struggling my entire life, but what happens at age 40? Do I have some kind of spiritual enlightenment? Does it all just kind of go away on its own? And the fortune teller thinks about it for a second and says, no, just by age 40, you just kind of get used to it. That can't be the best that we can hope for. And that is why today I am ruining seriousness. Now listen, I get the role that seriousness plays in our heads. We have this dialogue, so many of us, that in order for us to prove that we care about something, in order for us to show that we are responsible or dependable, in order for us to feel like adults who are productive members of society or who are high performing in our jobs, we think we have to bring this level of seriousness to the work that we're doing. And believe me, this is something that I realized I did for the better part of my entire life. From a very young age, I took life and myself very seriously. Now, I was always the jokey kid. I was always the class clown. I was always kind of, making jokes and kind of being the center of attention. But when it came to anything that didn't go my way, all bets were off. And I would just directly default into seriousness. And this really picked up for me where I really noticed it was in my professional career. Now, like probably so many of you, you are a high performer. Maybe you're a type A personality. You're somebody who really prides themselves on being productive, on being dependable, on being the one people can count on. And you want to excel and you want to grow and you want to advance in your career or you want to grow your business or you want to do all these things to become a better version of you, whatever that means in your world. And so it is very easy to default to seriousness. We believe that we have to bring this level of seriousness and heaviness to the work that we're doing, or otherwise we're not going to be successful. And then we think we have evidence to prove that fact because we're super serious and we always have a furrowed brow and we're working, and we're always saying we're swamped and everything feels like it's the end of the world, but nobody's going to get one over on us because we're going to be hyper vigilant and we aren't going to let something fall through the cracks. We're never going to drop the ball. We're going to get it all done and we're going to get it all done perfectly. And then when things do on the outside tend to work out, then we think there's the evidence. There's the proof that me being serious is the reason that I'm successful. But here's what seriousness actually does. See, many times I've seen in my own life and with people that I've coached around this, because when I started focusing on living a not so serious life, because I needed to, not because it was my natural thing, but when I really realized and started learning from my own coaches and mentors and from my own reading and seminars and all these other things that you guys are probably all doing as well, I really started seeing that bringing seriousness to the work I was doing, bringing seriousness to my life in general was actually robbing me of the joy of life. It was actually restricting my creativity. I figured out finally, and it only took me 30 years, that I was successful in spite of the fact that I was so serious, not because of the fact that I was so serious. Osho was actually once quoted as saying, seriousness is the essential soil for the ego. Think about that. Our ego wants us to be the best. The ego wants us to separate from the pack. The ego wants us to be above other people. Now, it doesn't mean you're a narcissist if that's the way you feel, but if you have a competitive nature, then our ego wants us to be the best at whatever it is we're doing. And even if you're not worried about being the best, let's just say you really care about what you're doing in the world. Let's say it's a business or it's something with your health or it's your relationship or it's doing a podcast like this. When you really care about something, that's actually the ego speaking. Now, if you followed any of my other work, and I'll probably cover this on another one of the episodes, I don't believe that ego is the enemy. I think the ego can really drive service, and that's for a different conversation. But it's good to notice that seriousness, as Osho said, is necessary soil for the ego. The ego needs to feel a sense of seriousness so that it can feel a sense of self-importance. And that's what we really want to get through today, because here, I have this quote that I say that I really want to share with you. Thinking that you have to be serious to be successful is like swimming laps in a pool of hot lava. Thinking you have to be serious to be successful is like swimming laps in a pool of hot lava. Yeah, you're going to get a great workout, but you're going to be dead before you can reap the benefits. So what's the other side of this, right? It was so interesting when I really started diving into what it means to live a not so serious life, and to then go into corporations and different organizations who were seeing the detriment of seriousness in their business, seeing people be demotivated, seeing morale go through the floor, seeing innovation and collaboration be kind of non-existent because people were too busy being serious and infighting, and nobody was listening. There was no compassion, there was no empathy, there was no innovation, there was no creativity, because all of that gets stifled when we're focusing on seriousness. So when we can really master living a not so serious life, the world opens up to us. And I'm not overstating this when I say it. When we're able to bring more lightness and levity to the work that we're doing in the world, no matter what kind of work that is, we are more creative. We see solutions and answers to problems and issues that we're facing that we may not have been able to see before because we were so tense in our little box of seriousness. You know, I remember this one moment back in November 2013. I had just recently started my coaching business. I had left my corporate job a couple of years earlier, about 2.5 years earlier, had my first startup that I ran for about a year or so. And then that unfortunately ended, although really fortunately now looking at the long-term scheme of things, because I learned so much in that. And then I had my second startup, which was with NASA and the space shuttle program. And I really wanted to transition into personal growth as a career, you know, a speaker, a coach, all the things that I do now. And so I had recently started my business. It was the end of 2013. And it was not going well. I was talking to as many people as I could. I was trying to get my skills up as a coach, and nobody was signing up to work with me. And I was getting really deflated, really disheartened. And I had what I call a feces moment. No, not that kind of feces. That we'll save that kind of craziness for season 2. But for now, the feces I'm talking about is an acronym that I created. It's FECS, and it stands for Fetal Entrepreneur Couch Syndrome. Symptoms include being balled up in the fetal position on the couch, being an entrepreneur, questioning all of your life choices and why you're putting yourself through all this to have your own business, wondering why you don't just go back and get a 9-to-5 job, because at least you have some kind of financial security and your family would understand what you were actually doing with your life and you could afford essentials like toilet paper. And that was a moment for me where I realized that I was taking my business and my life so seriously. Now, I didn't realize it on my own. Luckily, I had coaches and mentors in my life that were able to really pinpoint that when I'm at my best, I'm in a light and creative place. And when I'm not at my best, when I'm ineffective and unproductive in the work that I'm doing in the world, I'm in a much heavier, more serious place. Now, you have probably experienced some kind of feces in your life as well. And as a matter of fact, it's not just for entrepreneurs. It could also be fetal employee couch syndrome. There's something in your life that you've experienced this feces where it feels like you're drowning in feces. Yes, get that image in and out of your head as quickly as possible. But whatever it is, I want you to really give some thought to it as you're listening to or watching this episode, because whatever you may be feeling really serious about right now, I want you to keep that in mind as I share these tips with you, because seriousness is not going to get you to where you want to get in your relationship and your health and your business. I don't know about you, but anytime somebody said to me, you know, if you were a serious entrepreneur, you would be doing this. If you ever want to be in a serious relationship, you better do that. You better get serious about your health. I don't know if you've heard those before, but for me, when I hear those kinds of that kind of language, I don't feel expansive. I don't feel creative. I feel restricted. I feel like my butthole gets tighter and there's just no real forward movement that can happen. So on today's show, I'm going to share with you 6 ways to start living a more not so serious life while still being high performing and highly productive. This is going to be a really actionable, practical episode. I want you to bookmark and save this, because this is going to be the one you go back to anytime you're feeling overly serious and you want to lighten up and be able to actually be in momentum and in forward movement at the same time. So let's dive in. Okay. So the first tip here is a really simple one, and it's just a language shift. It's literally a one-word language shift that can take away a lot of the seriousness that we feel. Now, before I share what that language shift is, that one-word shift, as I mentioned earlier, and what I've definitely felt in my life, and just a reminder, everybody, I still have my own bouts with taking myself and life way too seriously. Even at some points during creating the kind of notes for this show and what I wanted to talk about today, I saw myself getting overly serious and attaching to it because I care about this show so much. So it was such a beautiful, perfect thing that I was creating this because I got to experience it in real time and feel that these tools absolutely work because I shifted myself in the moment. So one of the things that I've felt many times in my life, and it still comes back every once in a while, is this feeling of if you're not being serious, you're being irresponsible, right? That it's the responsible thing to be serious because it shows you care. It shows you're a professional. It lets other people know that you're here for the right reasons and you're doing all the things you can to make the thing a success. And so for this, I want to give you this language shift because it removes this fear that by you not being serious, you're being irresponsible. So why would we think that? Why would we think that if we're not being serious, it means we're being irresponsible? Well, it could be because of the definition of the word serious, or I guess more specifically here, what we think the opposite of the word serious is. If you think the opposite of the word serious is like flippant and like reckless, and you just are taking shots of whiskey all day and shooting people with water pistols and throwing water balloons at people and hula hooping instead of getting your work done, then yeah, you're going to fight against getting rid of your seriousness because you don't want to be seen as somebody who's not diligently doing their work in the world. And that's why I want to give you this one shift. And it's not even mine. It comes from a philosopher named Alan Watts. Many of you may know him. If you don't, check out his work. He's incredible. And he has this shift where he talks about, it's not about being serious. It's about being sincere. This is the one word shift I want to give you. Shift from being serious to being sincere. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm very sincere about my work. I want to be focused. I want to be attentive. I want to pour all of my love and my creativity into the work that I'm doing. But it doesn't mean I have to be serious in the process. If you can start shifting your mindset to say, am I taking this thing too seriously? And instead, can I be more sincere about how I show up to my work? Then you're getting rid of any notion that you're irresponsible or you don't care or you're flippant. And instead, you are purposefully and intentionally focusing your energy on the task that is at hand. All right, our next tip, and you hear the siren, you know what that means. Dad joke time. Okay, this is actually one of my favorite dad jokes. So a guy walks into a therapist and he says, Doc, I don't know what's going on. Night before last, I dreamed I was a wigwam, and last night I dreamed I was a teepee. What's going on here? The doctor looks at him and says, well, I think you're just too tense. Get it? Too tense, like T-E-N-T-S, and too tense, T-E-N-S-E. Okay, so anyways, the second tip I'm telling you here is about removing some of the tension in your world. And one of the best ways I've seen to do that is through movement. Now, I know if you're anything like me, I've had such body disconnection issues my entire life because I grew up overweight. And so anything that related to movement or dancing felt very, very uncomfortable and foreign for me. And so a practice that I've adopted over the last couple of years is being more in motion, doing things that are not just all in the head. For me, and I don't know about for you, but for me, I oftentimes default to living from my neck up. Right? Which is great. I don't demonize that at all. I love my intellectualness. I love how I process things in the mind. I love my mental prowess, if you will. And that's not often going to be the way that gets you out of tension. So a few ways that I do that have been effective for me, and there's tons of different ways you can do this. Number one is progressive muscle relaxation. Now, if you go on YouTube and just YouTube that or Google progressive muscle relaxation, typically the videos are a few minutes, maybe 2 minutes, maybe 5 minutes. Some are a little bit longer because they have a deeper meditation. But the process of progressive muscle relaxation is for you to essentially tense and then release each part of your body independently. And it's a beautiful practice. Like I said, it will take you 10 minutes max, but it really calms your nervous system. It really removes the tension from your body. A couple of other things I do with movement, jumping jacks. If you do, and I'm telling you, this works every single time. If you do 100 jumping jacks, and I know it can be difficult, and if you have like knee issues or joint issues, even just like waving your arm, doing the arm part of the jumping jacks can still be really helpful. You can do it! But if you do 100 jumping jacks and then stop, you will feel this buzzing energy throughout your entire body. And that is literally energy in motion. So when the energy was all like stopped up in your system, and that's why you were feeling this seriousness and this heaviness and this tension, the jumping jacks remove that in a really, really beautiful way. And the last thing here, again, really, really fun to do if you want to do it, is just have a dance party. Put on a song that you like. Of course, my hip hop is my thing, and just jump around for like 3 or 4 minutes, whatever it is. And it doesn't matter if it looks good. As a matter of fact, bonus points if you look stupid when you're doing it. But again, it's about getting out of our head and into our body. And that is a huge way to remove the tension and the seriousness that we're bringing to our lives. Okay, this next tip you're actually already doing in this moment. Look at you. You're such an overachiever. You're such a prognosticator. I don't know what it is. Anyways, you're so smart. You're already doing this. And tip number 3 is conscious consumption. Conscious consumption. Be really aware of what it is that you're putting into your brain, the shows you're watching, the things you're listening to. Turn off the damn news. And I know you're going to say, but I need to be informed. And I get that. And that's great to be responsible and be informed. I want you to be informed by what you watch. I don't want you to be infected by what you watch. And something I always remember when it comes to this, like, oh, but I need to know every little thing that's going on in the news, this 24-hour news cycle where they're recycling the same 4 stories over and over and over again and making them as detrimental and hopeless as possible. There's something I always remember. When I lived in Florida, we had tons of hurricanes, right? Hurricanes were a very big thing in Central Florida, especially. And we also had a fairly large homeless population in Orlando, where I lived, where I was raised. Interesting thing was the homeless people that were living on the streets did not have access to watch the news. They weren't sitting there watching TV all day. And yet when the hurricanes were coming through, the homeless people were always safe in some kind of a shelter before the hurricane hit. Now, why am I telling you this? Is because I truly believe the most important things that you are meant to hear about or learn about will make its way to you. You don't need to seek out things like the news in order to be fully informed. Turn off the news, turn on the comedy, turn on the things that are light. Go watch videos of soldiers coming home from war and reuniting with their family for the first time, or babies who are hearing for the first time who were born deaf, or watch things like Between Two Ferns with Zach Galifianakis, or anything that's really funny for you. That's one of my favorites. Or watch this show. Because I promise you, what you consume will up your level of consciousness and lower your level of seriousnness. Be very conscious about what you're consuming. Okay, my next tip actually comes from Japan. And it's a thing that the Japanese call, it's actually an aristocratic way of presenting language. It's something that's actually very professional on the surface. And it's something they call asobase kotoba. And asobase kotoba, easy for me to say, essentially brings the word play into the language that they speak. So you don't work at having a sales call. You play at having a sales call. You don't work at traveling from one country to another. You play at traveling from one country to another. You don't work on this issue you're having with your health. You play with the issue you're having with your health. And it's a really great question to ask ourselves when things are coming up, challenges are coming up, and we're feeling really serious about it. Ask yourself a really simple question. How can I play with this? That simple shift, getting into this mindset of, rubbing your hands together, rolling up your sleeves and getting down to work and saying, how can I play with this thing? It shifts your entire mindset so you're not taking the thing in front of you so seriously. You're using the language and the intention of play to work on your challenges and obstacles instead. And there's actually a really interesting secondary definition, at least that I've brought into asobase kotoba, that I realized as I was reading about this and when I first heard about it. There's a whole different way that you can look at using the word play when we're talking about being less serious and dealing with seemingly real challenges, right? Because I'm not here to tell you like you don't have bills to pay, or you don't have that health challenge, or you don't need to make more money in your business to be able to make payroll for your employees. I'm not saying any of that stuff is fake. I'm not here to spiritually bypass. What I'm saying is that in this particular sense especially, we can look at the word play as if we are playing a role, like an actor in a movie plays a role. The actor in a movie, save a few instances of things that went terribly wrong, they never truly believe that they are the character themselves. Now, maybe in the scene they do, but once they have a little bit of distance, the camera goes off, they go home for the night, they remember they were just playing a role. that person on screen is not who they are. So be like an actor. Play the role of frustrated entrepreneur whose project is not gaining traction and moving forward fast enough. And like stand up and admit this, either admit it to yourself, or if you really want to spark some joy and some play with your teammates, if you're working around other people on a team or you have a team, is share this with your entire team. Stand up and say, today I am playing the role of frustrated entrepreneur. And then take a bow, and everybody will start laughing and you will feel lighter as well. I promise you. I have done this countless times. Today, I am playing the role of podcaster who is taking the entire process of creating an episode about not being serious way too effing seriously. Thank you. And it's really, really fun because you start to realize that your ego is not actually who you are. You start getting separation between the role you are playing and the human that you are. And anytime we have that separation, we automatically take things way less seriously. Okay, and this next tip was actually a really, really big one for me. It was a huge shift that I had, and it was actually back in July of this year. I was in a place where I was taking things really seriously. There were new things that we were launching in the business. There were things we were changing in the business. There was, of course, everything going on with COVID and a bunch of different kind of just detailed things inside of our business that was causing me a lot of stress, or at least the way that I was approaching them was causing me a lot of stress. And then I went away with a few very close friends who had all been tested. It was all very safe. And we went away for a short weekend just to get out of LA. We drove an hour and a half to an Airbnb. And we were there. And one of the people that was there was my little nephew. Not by blood, but definitely by choice. And throughout that weekend, when we were at this Airbnb, there was a pool. Now, my little nephew is old enough and tall enough now where he could actually turn the knob on the door and walk out to the pool. And the pool didn't have any barrier around it. He was not even 2 years old at the time of us being there. And so, of course, I went into uncle mode and I was watching him, for the better part of the weekend to make sure he didn't accidentally fall into the pool, God forbid. Now, what I realized was at the end of that weekend, I drove back home, and Monday morning, which is the time where I normally would have a lot of feelings of seriousness because there's so much to get done. There's, it's the beginning of the week and the planning and what does the team need and what's on the schedule for this week and all these things that Mondays typically bring. And I realized that I had no stress, no seriousness. And so I sat down and tried to figure out why was that? What's different about this past weekend than every other weekend? And it's when I had this really, for me at least, big insight, big shift. And it was that for that weekend, I did not make work the center of my universe. So here's what I've noticed about myself. And I've shared this story with countless people and gotten a lot of feedback that they feel the same way. Whatever I make the center of my universe, I am also going to put all of my energy into it to make sure I protect it from failing or just falling apart. And so that takes a lot of seriousness to constantly be protecting what I think is the most important thing in my world. And so that weekend, the insight that I had was that from now on, I am going to, as much as possible, and again, I don't do it all the time, but it's an intentional practice that I try to choose moment by moment, is to make sure that I'm not making anything the center of my universe. Not my health, not my work, not my relationships, not my friendships. And I know it sounds weird, no, but you got to put your health first and you got to cultivate community and relationships. And I get it. All that stuff is important, but it's not the most important thing. If I make something the center of my universe, listen to me carefully, I will use all of my energy to protect that thing from failing or falling apart. And what's left over for me? Not much energy, not much joy, not much happiness. So instead, I actually shifted this and I do make one thing the center of my universe. And it's a practice that I'd love for you to try as well. Now, you can use whatever words resonate with you, but for me, I ask myself the question, am I making my own peace and ease the center of my universe right now? Very, very simple question. Am I making my own peace and ease the center of my universe right now? Now, oftentimes, just simply by asking myself that question, I start feeling the shift because I remember how important it is for me to cultivate peace and ease in my life. So just that moment, that momentary blip that gets me in between who I really am and my ego in that moment, between the seriousness and significance I'm putting on whatever's in my world and the truth, the reality that I'm perfectly safe and taken care of and loved in all ways that I could possibly be loved and supported. when I'm able to have that little teeny moment, things start to shift. And if I want to go further with that, and if the answer for me is no in that moment, that I don't feel like I'm making my own peace and ease the center of my universe, then I ask myself, what's one small way that I could? How could I be 5% more focused on my own peace and ease in this moment? And you may think that sounds irresponsible, but I promise you, when I do that, I regain so much creative energy and I can do so many more things in the outer world, in the world of form. And the final tip I want to share with you actually comes from astronauts, the Apollo 8 astronauts to be exact, and it is about the overview effect. Now, the overview effect is this amazing phenomenon that happened when the Apollo 8 astronauts went up into space and they took this first ever photo of Earth. Earth had never been seen in this way before, where the moon is in the foreground and Earth is kind of behind, it's in the background. And there was this moment where the astronauts who were seeing Earth from this perspective looked at it and said, wow, that little thing down there holds all my hopes and dreams. It holds my family, my friends. It holds all my concerns and all my worries about things that don't really matter. And from this vantage point, they were able to see that the earth and the world is both beautiful and fragile. That, as Nancy Klein says in her book, Time to Think, that we as humans are both essential and irrelevant. There was something liberating and so freeing for the astronauts to see the globe and to see the thing that when they're in it, they take everything so seriously, to see that melt away when they really zoom out. And you could do the same thing. You don't have to go into space for this, but really zoom out. Look at the true insignificance of the thing that's in front of you. Ask yourself the question, is there any possibility that I'm even taking this remotely too seriously right now? I mean, think about what you were stressed out about 5 days ago, 5 weeks ago, 5 months ago, 5 years ago. I guarantee you were stressed about something. I can almost guarantee you don't remember what it was. And even if you can, I can also almost guarantee it doesn't have the same emotional charge that it did when it happened. Practicing this zooming out effect really helps us to see the truth and the reality, the perfection of every moment that we're in right now, and the ability to be much lighter, to loosen your grip, as Sadhguru talks about. You know, if you think about this, imagine that you were a surgeon, right? You were like the best surgeon in the world, and you walked around all day with a phone in your hand and you were squeezing the phone as hard as you could. And just like I'm squeezing it right now, and like all the blood is rushing to my fingers and to my knuckles, and just my arms are shaking and everything is just so tense and so serious. And then after doing this all day, carrying this phone around and squeezing it with all my might, I'm asked to do a delicate heart surgery with a scalpel, with these fine, intricate movements that if I get them wrong, the person could die. Do you think I'd be able to do that? Of course not. We have to loosen our grip. Loosen our grip doesn't mean let go of everything. It doesn't mean just throw everything to chance and hope it all works out. But if I were to loosen my grip on my phone, it's still in my hand. I still see it's there. I can still use it. I can turn my hand over. I can use the phone itself. But it doesn't require me to have such a tight grip on everything in my world. So I want you to look at this for yourself. What do you have a tight grip on right now that you could loosen your grip by, again, even 5%? To see that the thing that you maybe are putting so much pressure on is not nearly as significant as you think it is. And even if it were, you having tight, clenched fists is not going to make you any more productive or any happier in the process. Okay, folks, so those are my 6 tips for you today on how to live a more not so serious life, but to still be productive and still be high performing in the process. And I'd love to know which of those tips really resonated with you the most. I want you to keep them in your back pocket. Try all of them, try one of them, but let me know how you go with these. If you actually test these out and they work for you, let me know. Or if they don't work for you, let me know. And just keep trying different things, because the goal here is to find the right tool that works for you. Not every tool works perfectly for everybody, but if you try enough of these tools, you'll find one that really, really works for you, and you'll see the seriousness start to dissipate. Now, before I go, I want to share one last story with you, and it's one of my favorite stories in the world. So 2 prime ministers are sitting there having a conversation when all of a sudden somebody bursts through the door and starts yelling and screaming and says, "Oh my God, I don't know what to do. We have this challenge and this thing's not working." And his arms are flailing and his face is bright red and his head looks like it's about to pop off his body. And the resident prime minister stops his conversation with the other prime minister, turns to the man and says, just remember rule number 6. The man takes a deep breath, composes himself, says, I'm so sorry for interrupting. Have a good day. And he leaves. The prime ministers go back to speaking again, and about 20 minutes later, this time a woman bursts through the door, and she's flailing her arms, and her hair looks like it's on fire, and she's yelling, and she has no idea what to do about all these different things. And again, the prime minister looks at her and says, don't forget, rule number 6. Again, this whole feeling of calm waves over her. She immediately gets calm, apologizes, and leaves the room. Now, after this happens a third time, the one prime minister turns to the resident prime minister and says, I've never seen anything like that before. One rule, and these people go from being frantic to being calm. You've got to tell me what's rule number 6. To which the prime minister responds, rule number 6 is don't take yourself so damn seriously. To which the other prime minister said, that is an amazing rule. Well, what are the other rules? And the resident prime minister says, there aren't any. Practice these tools for yourself. See what happens. But I can almost guarantee you, if you do practice them, your creativity and joy will increase and your blood pressure will decrease. That's all I have for you today. Thank you again so much for being a part of our world and being a part of this show. As always, if you love the show, share it with your peeps, put it up on social, throw it in your IG stories, and let me know what you love most about the episode. Leave us a rating and review if you haven't already. Subscribe on whatever platform you're on. And I cannot wait to see you guys next week so we can ruin some more shit. Lots of love to you guys. See you real soon. Peace.